As beautiful and peaceful as it is, America's rural heartland is not without its hardships. The remote mountains, plains, and valleys that make up most of our nation face challenges unheard of in populated urban areas. Perhaps the greatest of these challenges has been and continues to be communication. Bridging that hurdle has been the mission of the more than 1,000 rural independent local telephone companies who are the community-based telecom providers delivering advanced services to rural America.
Our service territory is about 4,600 square miles. And in that area we serve 2,700 customers. So we just barely have more than one customer per mile.
In this area, we have to use the rock saw to get through this solid rock in order for the cable plow to come in, and we can go approximately 1,500 feet in a day.
It costs us about $45,000 a mile to plow fiber. That's very high. High cost is a problem, which then requires us to have universal service support and that type of thing.
It's literally lots of just straight up and down mountain. When they took the first cable over the mountain back in, I believe it was the 60s, they literally had to drag a cable up over the mountain with mules. I always like to tell this story. There's a splice case that's up on top of that mountain that we had to go repair almost on an annual basis, where a bear climbs up it and chews into it.
The challenges that face rural telecom providers today are just the beginning of the story. In the very early days of rural telephony, lines were hard to come by and even harder to maintain. Usually running along fence post lines, these systems were shoddily built and were subject to destruction by any number of forces.
In the rural areas, there was no telephone service, other than just a few ring-down lines that like a gas company or somebody had put up there.
Early phone lines installed for rural residents were party lines, where up to 20 people could be in on the conversation at one time, allowing for few truly private conversations. The operator, usually a young woman, would connect families to doctors, funeral homes, and the fire department in times of crisis, often learning the details of events before anyone else.
Well, the last I knew, he was at the Gibbs's, but they said he had gone over to Jed Moore's. They're expecting a baby, but I can't seem to get them.
The combination of the party line and the operator made the telephone company the hub of community news and information, and gossip. During the Great Depression, the state of rural telephone service went from bad to worse. The value of the dollar plummeted, and many rural telephone service providers received payments not in dollars, but in the form of chickens, grain, and hides.
My grandfather bought the telephone company, the Germantown Company, in 1928. They made it through the Depression, thank goodness. Story of collecting potatoes and for payments and produce and just making it through.
As the Depression grew deeper, telephone systems deteriorated due to neglect. Overall, rural electric and telephone systems were in shambles. The situation had reached a fever pitch. It was clear that something had to be done for America's heartland. But what? On May 11, 1935, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed a bill to create the Rural Electrification Administration, now known as the Rural Utilities Service, or RUS. It was an organization created to help struggling rural communities gain access to electricity. In 1949, amendments to the bill applied the program to telephone service specifically, designating funds for the development of telephone systems in rural communities. At first, RUS loans were intended for the big telephone companies, in the hopes that they would extend service to rural areas. But when little interest was shown, rural communities came together to improve telephone service for themselves.
They got together and they did a lot of door knocking, and they collected $40 equity certificates and went to the RUS, and I believe started in 1958. And we've been rocking and rolling ever since.
The loan program allowed community-based telecom providers to spring up all over rural America, connecting the nation's heartland and the global community for the first time. RUS loans to this day enable rural telecom providers to implement new technologies, helping them solve their own unique challenges.
Community-based telephone companies have always been on the leading edge of providing technology and advanced technology to their customers and to their communities.
In October of 2001, we received a phone call from the White House Communications Bureau. We had a fairly urgent request that someone was coming to our service area, and they had a need for a huge number of telephone lines, high-speed circuits, and video capabilities to the middle of a rural exchange.
In the days immediately following September 11th, White House officials needed a secure area where Vice President Dick Cheney and his staff could maintain regular operations.
So they asked us if we could actually go out and put in like 25 phone lines and ISDN video lines out to a remote location, which happened to be a hunting lodge that was in our service area.
Obviously, something like this wasn't what we'd planned for, so we had to drop everything and construct new facilities and install electronics to satisfy this need.
Their experience with the latest communications technologies enabled Venture Communications Cooperative to securely outfit the entire premises to White House requirements, all within a matter of days.
We knew his communication was very critical in this time of crisis, really, because we were just starting this war on terrorism after 9/11. So the company in itself took it very serious about the importance of the good service that they would have out there.
We worked 18-hour days and weekends to satisfy this need, and we got the job done in time.
Rural telecom providers' commitment to cutting-edge technology served the nation well in the days following September 11th, not just in South Dakota, but in small towns everywhere as families used telephone, email, and cell phone service to contact loved ones. But being at the forefront of technology has benefits that go far beyond times of national crisis.
I think we're starting to realize that community-based telephone companies play a very important role in making sure that the nation stays connected, and that's going to have, I think, as we go forward, nationally a bigger significance.
Today, community-based telecom providers adopt and develop new technologies as soon as they become available.
When we make a decision to deploy a technology, we're able to make the decision locally. We don't have the bureaucracies that some of the RBOCs have. We can look at what's available and evaluate what best serves our needs and deploy it. Turnaround time is usually a lot shorter because we're smaller and more nimble.
We have today 3,200 access lines. We got into cable television in 1984. We started internet service in 1995. Got into DSL 3 years ago. So it's been a steady progression of technology.
Hey on, Bob. Okay. Phil Miller. Come to do your DSL.
They know their customers, they know the services they need to provide, and they go ahead and they put them in.
Community-based telecom providers also play a large part in training their customers to adapt to the latest advancements, even if it means bringing the classroom directly to them.
We offer free internet classes to folks that are our customers.
Once you're in your address book, we're going to learn how to add a new contact. To do that, move your mouse pointer to the button that says New.
We get folks from 16 to 80 some years old in there who are just trying to get on the internet and learn some about it.
In these remote areas where such technologies are less common and educational opportunities aren't as easy to come by, the local telecommunications companies are often the ones who step up to make sure their customers are not left behind.
Anytime that it turns to a hand, you are on top of a hyperlink. Notice my mouse pointer is a hand over the truck. If I click now, what kind of link is that going to take us to? More information about buying this truck, right?
Rural telecommunications providers are not only pioneers in making new technology readily available, but also in making this technology user-friendly.
I look at my children living in Washington, D.C. My children can go right down to the Smithsonian's. They can go over to the Library of Congress. Well, right now, today, kids in rural America can just go ahead and click right on to the Internet. They have the exact same access that any child living anywhere in the United States has, and that is incredibly empowering.
I'm on the Internet at home because my dad's got a computer. First, I went to CartoonNetwork.com, Nickelodeon.com, and then Zubix.com, then AnimalPlanet.com.
Rural telecommunications providers like Penasco Valley Telecom have a long history of going the extra mile to provide services and solutions to those who matter most, their customers.
Customer service, I think, is truly one of the benchmarks of small independent telephone companies. I think it is one of the things that sets them absolutely apart from others in the industry. And it's interesting in that actually it's been documented by the FCC. The FCC actually has a bureau that tracks consumer complaints and issues. And the percentage of what they hear about independent telephone companies is almost undocumentable.
From their first days of operation through the 21st century, rural telecom providers across the country have strived to make their customers and their communities the very first priority. In the late 1990s, Ronald Thompson saw his cattle rearing business close to collapse. At his remote ranch in western South Dakota, he was finding it more and more difficult every year to sell his cattle locally. Close to giving up his land, Thompson decided to try one last venture to salvage his business and lifestyle. He made a groundbreaking discovery thanks to the local telecommunications company Sully Buttes Telephone Cooperative, now known as Venture Communications Cooperative.
Sully Buttes had offered internet connection, which wasn't available until Sully Buttes bought our local exchange. I'd never been on the internet, and we got hooked up, and I just started searching around for club calves and show steers because that's the business we're in, and there weren't any on there, and I thought, gee, maybe we should be doing this.
The DSL connection supplied by the rural telecom provider not only helped Thompson to stay in the area, but using the internet as a business tool has put him in touch with markets all over the country.
If we hadn't had the option of hooking up the internet and starting the website, we might still be here, but it would have been a terrible struggle. Financially, it was getting to the point where we had to do something different. It's pretty much saved us.
We've seen an influx of many downstate people, and most of the demands and their questions concern whether they can telecommute or not. And with DSL and everything that brings with it, they can telecommute. And we've seen a lot of building, a lot of second homes going in, and it's happening more and more due to the technology.
Such advancements in communications technology are shortening the distance between business owners in rural areas and their customers worldwide. Using the same technologies, rural youth in even the most remote locations now have access to the same educational resources as their urban counterparts.
We don't have a town. Penasco School is a school by the road, and most people that drive by the highway don't even know it's a school. It's just a tiny building with basically 3 classrooms and a cafeteria. There's 2 teachers, 23 kids. When they graduate from this school, which only goes to the 8th grade, they have to go to Artesia, which is another 55 miles to town, so it's another hour.
All right, you talked about ancient civilizations quite a bit.
The Penasco School in eastern New Mexico is one of the most remote in the country. But the area's rural telecom provider, Penasco Valley Telecommunications, has made sure these school children have all the educational opportunities they need to succeed.
PVT is crucial to getting, like with the internet access that we have now. We get it from them as a service to help us with our internet access. Otherwise, I mean, you're out of touch, so to speak. And so they provide reliable, continuous service to us and we can go and be anywhere with the internet with the DSL that they have provided.
Seeing the effect of our work with Penasco School, the fact that we've provided them internet and we can do a little financial help. 23 rural children that are getting probably a better education than in most other schools. You'd have to be pretty coarse not to hit a lump in your throat to see what goes on there when you see these kids.
Across the country, more and more rural children are getting internet access to supplement their education. This has been largely due to the support of community-based telecom providers.
We have computer labs installed in every one of our buildings, in some places 2 or 3 computer labs. One of the results have been we are able in a rural area to use broadband internet broadcast, and we can offer to high school students any class that they ever want to take, all because of the work that Hardy Telecommunications has been able to do within our school system.
Not only are rural telecom providers active in local schools, but they play an important role as neighbors in their communities.
They run into their customers in the grocery store, they run into them in the hardware store, and by gosh, if the network goes down or there's some problem, they're getting a phone call at home.
As they move into the next century, rural telecom providers continue to supply their customers with the latest in communications technology. But even as they go forward, they face a number of new challenges. One of the most critical is enabling the younger population to stay in these areas.
Our young people are leaving. There are few opportunities in rural America for our brightest people to stay.
One of the things that is very important to the continued future of these communities is their youth, and it is their youth coming back into the communities and building a role and bringing their families back there.
We, by providing the communications network, the high-speed internet, and all of the services that we offer, hopefully we can attract businesses, allow people to start their own businesses, and where distance isn't a problem.
Tools like the internet and wireless communications are slowly changing this downward trend. But these services could be cut back severely or disappear if certain regulatory action is not taken by the Federal Communications Commission. The National Policy of Universal Service was established in 1935 to ensure that all Americans have access to affordable telecommunications, and that necessary cost recovery is available to those who make the commitment to serve the nation's most economically challenging markets. Without this support mechanism, the cost to rural America and the nation as a whole would be severe. The farmers, factory workers, and business owners of America's rural communities help keep our country strong and prosperous. In order to make their communities stronger and provide our cities and urban areas with superior goods and services, it is vital that they continue to stay on the forefront of communication. Together, we can help these communities overcome the many challenges they face and help keep everyone in America connected.
You have to almost step back for a minute and say, what would it be like if these folks did not have this access? And you have to start thinking about, what does it mean for a rural community if suddenly your school children can't access the internet? And what does that mean when those kids go on to college and they're sitting in a class next to students from Chicago who had a very different set of experiences and a different set of opportunities? What does it mean to rural businesses? What does it mean to rural communities when these rural businesses have to close up because they don't have a customer base anymore?
A rich history filled with technological achievement extraordinary customer service, and vital community support, rural telecom providers across the nation are proud of the legacy they've created and maintained. From switchboard operators and party lines, to the latest in fiber optics and high-speed internet service, the attitude of local service providers to the people they serve has not changed. Just as they did in their early days, community-based telecom providers continue to improve the quality of service and the quality of life in small towns across the country, keeping them connected in ways that ultimately benefit us all.